Who in their right mind would replace their desktop and laptop for a handheld? Guilty as charged. I'm definitely not of a sound mind, because over the course of 5 months or so, I challenged myself to use the OneXplayer 2 as my daily driver. Now, I've long delayed reviewing this device for a few reasons. One of the reasons was that I wanted to be able to share a more in-depth experience, since I haven't seen any reviews like this one myself. So that's exactly what I set out to do with this OneXplayer 2, and here's my long-term review of this device. One that I used daily for over 8 hours a day. Oh, and in case you were wondering, no, this isn't a sponsored video or anything like that. I paid for this myself, and my criticisms of the device that you'll hear later in the video should give you confidence in that statement. And unlike my usual reviews, I'm going to forego the spec sheet here because that's boring. Now, the main gimmick, if you will, of this device are the detachable controllers, making it a de facto Switch-like machine. We'll soon see something slightly different to this concept in the Lenovo Legion Go, but that's a story for a different day. The controller connector is probably the one thing that sets this implementation apart from the Switch Joy-Cons, as this is required to get those detached controllers to work when disconnected from the main body. And I'll go over that in more detail later. In terms of ergonomics, the device is quite comfortable to hold despite being so massive. And at nearly 900 grams or 2 pounds, it can get tiring when gaming for long sessions, if you're not placing it down somewhere. But that's pretty par for the course with these big boy handhelds. The built-in kickstand here is clutch for those cases, when you need to give your hands a break. Hey, what are you thinking? Now, the buttons are clicky, though they're on the smaller side, and the D-pad is responsive as well. The joysticks also feature the coveted Hall sensors, which means that they're not prone to drift. I said in my ROG Ally video, these are baby buttons and sticks. And yeah, I stand by that statement, because they are a bit smaller, and the print on the buttons isn't exactly legible, at least not to me. There's also these orange LEDs around the sticks, which aren't RGB, so yeah, no extra FPS here. Womp womp. Given this thing was my primary device, things kind of went sideways from what I had originally planned well before I started thinking about this video. I used the OneXplayer 2 as both my work PC and my home gaming device. And though I did occasionally use my desktop, that was solely for video editing for the YouTube channel. The OneXplayer 2 fielded all other daily tasks, like answering emails, writing reports, content consumption, of course, gaming, and even the occasional research for video ideas. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the keyboard and stylus that you can get if you decide to purchase them are bad, like real bad. I'm a casual key enjoyer, and the missed key presses, non-standard QWERTY layout, and lack of backlight were real drawbacks for me. Not to mention that when the device sleeps, you have to reattach it in order for the handheld to then recognize the keyboard again. And as for the stylus, let's just say that my Surface Pro from 2012 had more functionality. Oh, don't mind the skin, I like the blasphemous nature of it, especially after I got my ROG Ally. That's why it's there. They don't sell that officially. On the gaming side, as with any of these Windows handhelds, it came with its quirks. So using apps like Handheld Companion or Handheld Control Panel are pretty much a must, unless you stay inside Steam Big Picture mode, and even then, you'll probably want to use one of those programs. Once you get going though, things are quite smooth, as it can play pretty much anything you throw at it, sometimes even at higher resolutions like 1200p and 1600p if you keep your expectations in check. Obviously, this thing is now a bit dated, as there's a Ryzen 7 6800U in there, and there is a refresh in the form of the OneXplayer 2 Pro with the Ryzen 7 7840U. So this particular unit I have is more comparable to a Ryzen 7640U in devices like the GPD WinMax 2 refresh, and probably slightly better than the Z1 non-extreme ROG Ally. And now that you've gotten a rough idea about my use case and the capabilities of the device, once I finished my testing and enough time had lapsed for this video's research, I dropped this thing cold turkey. Not because I hate the device, but because there's so many other things that I have to work around for my use case. For me, as I needed to use another keyboard, for the reasons I stated before, it essentially meant that the OneXplayer 2's keyboard was useless or pointless. Take your pick. And as a person who spends a lot of time looking over documentation at work, the 8.4-inch screen, while very pleasant to game on, especially on the go, just wasn't big enough for reading anything lengthy. So I then needed to attach a portable monitor, and then I found myself adding a mouse. Add on the fact that I work in a shared environment means that I can't exactly just roll up to work with a handheld without getting a few looks. And so you might see where I'm going with this. At that point, It just made more sense for me to get a laptop for work, which is ironic because I sold my Razer Blade to get this. My initial desire for the OneXplayer 2 was to have that all-in-one device for work and play, and the detachable controllers served as a stealthy way to, let's put it, use the handheld at work. But before you angrily write in the comments that I should have just gotten a WinMax 2, let me say that I did consider that, but because I wanted a handheld first device rather than a laptop first device, which the WinMax 2 appears to be for what I can tell anyway, I went for the OneXplayer 2. Now, I'm not writing off the WinMax 2, I've just not had the luxury to review or use one. I do expect for work-related tasks, the WinMax 2 would be overall a better experience, pretty much hands down. But for gaming, I'm not so sure, because I have little baby average size hands. Yep, that's what I said. So I figured I want something that I could hold for a longer period of time. I'm personally also more interested in the Win Mini's form factor, which is why I've backed the project. So stay tuned for a review on that. Okay then, so where does that leave me now? Before I answer that, I'd like to invite you to check out the links in the description, as well as hitting the like and subscribe buttons on screen if you'd like to see more independent reviews like this one. And if you'd like a place to talk to handheld and gaming enthusiasts like yourself, do check out the Discord link. You won't be disappointed. Before we get to the verdict on this thing, I need to share a little bit more of the story and my experience with the company. During this journey, I actually excluded nearly a month where I was without the device because I had to send it in for a micro SD card issue. As an ROG Ally owner, your ears may have just perked up. So in this case though, the micro SD card slot did function, but the hardware issue would cause a card to constantly eject. And while I did come up with a temporary fix, which I also shared with the community, I wanted to be able to share what the experience was like RMAing the device. Essentially, the entire process took about a month. They sent me a label after some back and forth, and then they held it for a few weeks before finally sending it back to me more or less safe and sound. There were other issues attached when I RMA'd the device. They were relatively minor though, but I'll go over them now. One of the issues I had was with the keyboard, which they advertised as having magneto-level magnets that could hold the device up, which clearly wasn't the case. And their packing slip indicated it was replaced, but I actually noticed zero difference. I also complained about offset printing on the buttons of the second set of controllers I got. Yes, that's right, I got a second set of controllers, and I'm gonna go over why that's a problem in a little bit. That offset printing though was ignored as far as I could tell. The conclusion of that RMA though was that once I got it back, micro SD card slot did seem to function as intended. If you're concerned about RMAing a device through a Chinese company, well, if you look at the ROG Ally and what ASUS is doing, I don't know, they're probably kind of comparable at this point. I also said earlier that I would go over the connector in detail, and as far as I know, no one else has really talked about this connector. This connector had been delayed since the launch of the Indiegogo campaign. The reason for this was that ONE-NETBOOK, the company that created OneXplayer, stated they needed to redesign the connector. As such, it was many months before people got their hands on a connector, around 4 to 5 months of delay by my count, for what is an essential component to the device, at least in my opinion. The issue with the connectors themselves are numerous. The controller connector only works with the supplied USB-A dongle, which, that's right, means you can't actually use two sets together, because the device only has one USB-A port. Oh, you summer child, you might say, just plug it in. You think I'm that much of a fool? 'Cause I mean I am. But these things only plug in to charge, and they are not recognized when plugged in. Okay, so what about Bluetooth? Nope, there's no Bluetooth on board. So the only way to make use of more than one set of these controllers is to use some kind of USB-A port adapter, or to have one set of the controller connectors always connected to the device itself. Brilliant, right? And okay, maybe I'm nitpicking there, but there are other issues, like the repurposed LED from the OneXplayer 2 Pro connector, the fact that there's no added functionality that comes from the connector, such as no extra buttons, no charge level indicator, and whatnot. The extra buttons you see on the connector itself just serve to sync and power on the device. So it's incredibly frustrating to see all of the suggestions that come from the community about a Pro-style controller that, for example, has a trackpad or Bluetooth, and all of these suggestions get ignored. In the end, the device's whole shtick is less than a shtick, and for the time that I've spent with the OneXplayer 2, although I've thoroughly enjoyed the display and the performance, I've had some serious issues with it. So maybe I'm being unfair because of how much I wanted to like the device. It also costs a lot of money. And so I can't in good conscience recommend it in light of other devices now available on the market or coming very soon. So would I do this again? Right now, probably not. Even with those other big devices like the Legion Go and the Ayaneo Kun, I'm not convinced there's one device to rule them all. And yeah, that might be a hot take, but believe me, no one is more disappointed in that claim than me. Maybe when Thunderbolt 5 comes to these handhelds and eGPUs become more commonplace, I'll recommend this challenge to use only a handheld. But by that time, I'll probably be replaced by an AI. So no, I'm not an AI just yet. And if you were wondering if you should get a OneXplayer 2 Pro, as far as I know, that model still suffers from all of these things that I mentioned before, as it's literally the same device with just an upgraded chip inside. But hey, maybe you fancy dropping over $1,000 on one of these things. Who am I to judge? Except I will judge you if you don't check out that new Discord server I just joined, along with some real good lads like OKS Gamer, Windeck Tech, and Gaming for Insight. So you can get all the handheld news and support in one place. Oh, and while you're at it, and as Mr. Sujano says, hit the like button if you liked the video, and if you didn't like the video, hit the like button. And why not check out these reviews next?
GG.